across the southern edge of Egypt, where the green ribbon of the Nile meets the burning sands of Nubia, a colossal wall of rock and earth stretches from shore to shore. On one side lies an inland sea of deep blue water reaching far into the desert. On the other, the Tamed River slips quietly north toward the heart of Egypt. It is one of the largest dams ever built, a mountain raised by human hands to master a river that shaped a civilization. Welcome to the Aswan High Dam. We are at Aswan, in the far south of Egypt, where the long green valley of the Nile narrows and the desert closes in on both sides. This is the ancient frontier between Egypt and Nubia, a land of granite hills, golden sand, and the great river that has always been the lifeline of this country. Here the Nile is broadest and most powerful, and here, just above the old city, the modern dam rises across the water and holds back a reservoir that stretches for hundreds of miles into the sun. The dam itself is an immense bank of rock and clay, far wider at its base than it is tall, a broad artificial ridge that seals the valley from cliff to cliff. It is not a slender concrete wall, but a vast embankment, millions of tons of stone and sand piled into a barrier miles across. Completed in the year 1970, after a decade of enormous labor, it remains one of the largest dams in the world. To stand upon its crest is to feel the sheer weight of the ambition that raised it. What makes the dam extraordinary is not only its size but its purpose. Behind it presses the full force of the Nile, the longest river on Earth, gathered and held in check by this single great barrier. The structure is broad enough to carry a road along its top, and deep enough at its heart to resist the endless push of the water. Everything about it speaks of scale, a work meant to stand for generations, and to hold an entire river to the will of a nation. Behind the wall lies the reason for it all, a vast body of water known as Lake Nasser. It is one of the largest reservoirs ever made, a shining inland sea born entirely from the trapped waters of the Nile. Where once the river ran narrow through the desert, now a wide expanse of blue spreads across the land, its shores curling into countless bays and inlets. From the crest of the dam, the lake seems endless, a mirror of sky set improbably in the middle of the sand. The reservoir reaches far to the south, stretching for hundreds of miles across the Nubian desert and beyond the border into neighboring lands. Along its edges, bare golden hills drop straight into deep blue water, a meeting of two worlds that could hardly be more different. There are no forests here, no soft green banks, only rock and sand and the vast still surface of the lake. It is a strange and beautiful sight, an ocean of fresh water resting in the heart of one of the driest places on Earth. For thousands of years, long before the dam, the Nile lived by a single mighty rhythm. Each summer, rains far to the south swelled the river until it rose and spilled over its banks, drowning the fields of Egypt beneath a sheet of muddy water. This was the Great Flood, the inundation, awaited every year with hope and with fear. When the waters withdrew, they left behind a gift of dark, rich silt, and in that renewed earth the farmers of the valley planted their crops. Upon that yearly flood, the whole of ancient Egypt was built. The dark soil it laid down made the narrow valley one of the richest farmlands in the ancient world, feeding cities, temples, and kings. Yet the flood was never certain. A weak year brought famine, and a violent one swept away homes and drowned the harvest. For all its bounty, the river was a wild power that no one could truly command, and the fortunes of the land rose and fell with its unpredictable waters. The great purpose of the dam was to end that ancient uncertainty forever. By holding the summer flood behind its wall, it broke the wild cycle that had ruled the valley since the dawn of history. No longer would the Nile burst its banks or fail in a dry year. Instead, the trapped water could be released steadily, month by month, in measured amounts. For the first time, the river that had made Egypt was placed firmly under human control, its ancient fury stilled behind a mountain of stone. The tamed river was also made to work. As the stored water is let through the base of the dam, it drives great turbines that spin day and night, turning the weight of the Nile into electricity. When the dam first opened, it produced a vast share of all the power in the country, bringing light and machinery to towns and villages that had never known them. The energy of the falling water, once wasted in the yearly flood, now flows out along the wires to power a modern nation. With the flood tamed and the water stored, the fields of Egypt changed as well. The steady flow released from the lake allowed farmers to water their land through the whole year, raising more than one harvest where the old flood had allowed but one. New ground along the valley could be brought under the plow, and the reservoir itself became a reserve against drought, a bank of water to draw upon in the lean years. The dam promised a fuller, more certain harvest for a growing people. Yet such a transformation came at a heavy human cost. When the reservoir filled, its rising waters drowned a vast stretch of the ancient homeland of Nubia, a proud people who had lived along these southern reaches of the Nile for countless generations. Villages, palm groves, and burial grounds vanished beneath the lake. Tens of thousands of Nubians were moved from the valley of their ancestors to new settlements on higher ground, carrying their language and traditions with them, but leaving their old riverside world forever beneath the water. The rising lake also threatened some of the greatest treasures of the ancient world. Among them stood the temples of Abu Simbel, their colossal seated figures carved into a cliff more than 3,000 years ago. Rather than let them drown, nations from across the world joined in a daring rescue. The immense statues and temples were cut into great blocks, lifted piece by piece, and rebuilt on higher ground safely above the new shoreline. It was one of the most remarkable feats of preservation ever attempted. Below the dam, the Nile flows on as it always has, but changed. Freed at last from its violent floods, the river runs calm and even through the towns and cities of the north, past Aswan and onward to the distant delta and the sea. The banks no longer drown each summer, and the silt that once renewed the fields now settles instead at the bottom of the lake. It is a gentler river now, reliable and steady, shaped as much by the works of people as by the ancient will of nature. For modern Egypt, the dam is far more than a wall of stone. It became a proud symbol of a nation reaching for its future, a declaration that the river which had ruled the land for millennia could at last be mastered. Its power lit the cities, its water fed the fields, and its very scale spoke of ambition and independence. Yet it carries a mixed inheritance of great gains for the many, and of loss for the Nubians whose homeland lies beneath the lake, a monument to both the promise and the price of taming a river. A mountain of stone across the Nile, an inland sea shining in the Nubian desert, and a river that once ruled a land now guided by human hands. The Aswan High Dam stands as one of the great works of the modern age, holding within it both the triumph and the sorrow of remaking an ancient world. Thank you for watching. Follow for more interesting people, places, and things we cover on the channel.